Good morning, everybody. This is our session on utilitarianism, maximize the good, everyone included. This is our third consequentialist theory, and maybe the one that is most known from the consequentialist perspectives. Our objectives for today are central questions. Are consequences more important than intentions in terms of ethical behavior? How important is pleasure in ethical behavior? And can we develop a system in which ethics can be mathematically measurable? I want to take this moment to congratulate you on your answers for our video module on contractarianism and the ethical egoist perspective of Adam Smith. I saw very compelling uh, answers to the issues about like the choice of what fish should we buy, the role of intentions, and your interactions were really rich. So congratulations on that work. I think that we are going to keep on working on those elements, especially in this theory that is expanding and in other theories that are kind of like opposing some of the notions that we have seen. Um, just a recap, this is utilitarianism as the theories that we have seen in the last two sessions are consequentialist theories. Are theories that are focusing the main concept or the main property of actions as the ones that are connected to its consequences. The consequences of the actions are the ones that are making the action good or bad. So the notion that the moral value of an act should be judged by its consequences, both intended and unintended. Right actions are the ones that produce the greatest balance of good over evil, and that is the property that we are trying to identify to know what is good and bad. So before we move on, I want to give some sort of like a historical context on what was going on. So we saw some issues, some historical issues that were associated with Britain in the 16th and 17th centuries with Thomas Hobbes, the death of George I, and some other ideas in which there was a huge criticism and there was several questionings on what was the role that religion should play in the construction of morality. In our class, we had already asked that question if morality should be guided, if religion should be that compass that is going to be used to judge and to identify morality. And this is a question that is ongoing. So James Rachels describes that twist, that difference that utilitarianism is going to present on the same token about the support for morality. So the principle of utility says nothing about God, nor does it speak about abstract rules written in the heavens. Morality is not viewed as obedience to a list of ancient proclamations, or as Peter Singer puts it, a system of nasty puritanical prohibitions designed to stop people from having fun. We are facing these a wave of authors that are trying to find some rational principle that is going to guide morality, that is breaking with the tradition of authority. Authority is not going to be the main element for morality anymore. Now it is not going to be based on obedience of what is it that we are told that we have to do. Instead, we are looking for a very specific property that rationally defends what are the things that should and should not be done. So let's see this case study. In this case, we have this beautiful cabin in the woods, in the mountains. Jordan owns this vacation cabin in the mountains that they only use a few times per year. His friends have expressed interest in borrowing the cabin for weekend getaways when nobody's using it. And Jordan now faces a choice. They can keep the cabin for exclusive personal use for him and his family, or he should allow their friends or maybe close relatives to use it when it's vacant. What do you think is the right thing to do in this kind of situation? Now, when we analyze this case, we have a clear we have a clear view of what are the consequentialist notions that separate egoism and utilitarianism. Um, the consequentialist calculation that ethical egoism would present an analysis in which we are trying to find the most positive outcomes for the most important person in the world, which is me. I am just trying to ensure that I get the best possible outcomes for my actions and whatever I do. And if somebody else is getting any benefit, it is just collateral. It is just like an added benefit, but it is actually not important. The only important thing is that I get the most benefits. Now, utilitarianism is going to focus on something that, and I need you to focus a lot on this. The idea of utilitarianism is the maximization of positive outcomes. We have to maximize something in an idea that they are going to call pleasure units or utility units. So if we put a number on the amount of pleasure, on the amount of benefits, on the amount of good that is going to be brought by an action, then the calculation, the equation here is going to be different from what we have seen with ethical egoism. Here we have that we are promoting the most positive outcomes for the largest amount of people, and in opposition to trying to get the least amount of pain for the least amount of people. Um, those of you that are very uh, knowledgeable of math, you might see like direct and opposed relation, all that stuff. But the main point here is I am trying to get the most happiness from my actions. In this case, I would be happy by using my cabin. Uh, of course, being Jordan. Jordan would be happy by using the cabin for him and his family. He would go to the cabin, I don't know, twice a year, 3 times a year. So he would get several, like, I don't know, let's say 1 unit of happiness for going for every trip, and his wife and his 2 kids. So that's 4 units of happiness 3 times a year. So that's, I don't know, um, about 12, no, hold on, sorry, four, yeah, 4, 8, 12 units of happiness in a year. However, if he is allowing his friends to use the cabin, and if it would be, I don't know, 10 friends that could go in different times a year, it would significantly, could do the math. You know that I'm not going to do it well, but basically what we're having here is that there is more happiness produced. There's a maximization of positive outcomes. Therefore, we can see how the better action is for him to allow his friends to use the cabin, at least under utilitarian terms. So um, that is the main point. But this theory, in the process of maximizing positive outcomes, is also concerned about reducing the amount of negative outcomes, which is reducing pain to the least amount of people. So if we consider that this is a cabin that is in a very bad shape, it has no water, the roofs are leaking, it's dangerous, maybe a bear is going to come and hurt people. So it is going to have a possibility to promote pain, and actually in this case, the reduction of pain is going to be fundamental to make the best possible outcome, to commit the best possible action here. So that is the maximization of positive outcomes that are connected with utilitarianism. Um, I assume that there are some calculations that you are doing in your head right now. So what if it actually ends up giving us bad outcomes? What if like my friends are not going to take good care of the cabin, and then I am going to, I don't know, have some sort of like a bad situation with my friends. Maybe I'll lose my friends. And maybe the other ones that I'm not allowing them to use are going to have hold grudges, like that kind of stuff. In those cases, I will have to analyze the action that is going to promote the best possible outcomes. That is my only analysis. It's not about being generous. It's not about being, I don't know, egoistic. I don't know those kinds of things. Generosity in itself is not something that we should promote because generosity is good. What we are promoting here is what are the best possible outcomes, and my analysis of those circumstances are going to give us the right answer to this situation. So that is what we have in utilitarianism, trying to promote the best possible outcomes because it is all a matter of numbers. Numbers are going to be what determines what morality is. If you remember the trolley car problem, and you remember the different elements like the sidetrack or the chubby guy over the bridge, and this is a cartoon that was produced by BBC4, the same videos that we watch with Ayn Rand. You could see that there is this sidetrack that says utilitarian spur, and that is the sidetrack in which we have one person dying instead of 5 people dying. So that is the way in which utilitarians would take, basically, because one person dying, 1 unit of pain is better than 5 units of pain. Um, Maybe if we count also the families, maybe one family in pain is better than 5 families in pain. Um, and I'm sure that you're in your mind, you are trying to calculate, well, what if it is 5 single people and this guy has, I don't know, 10 children? In all of these cases, it is just a matter of numbers, and numbers are what are the ones that are going to determine what is the best possible outcome. John Stuart Mill, who is a very significant representative of this theory, he said that utility, or the greatest happiness principle, holds that actions are right in proportion as they tend to promote happiness and wrong as they tend to produce the reverse of happiness. The story of John Stuart Mill is very interesting because utilitarianism was developed by his father, James Mill, and another author called Jeremy Bentham. They were developing this philosophical idea of utilitarianism and the calculation of outcomes and some other things that we're going to see in a moment. And at that point, James Stuart Mill was born, and it was kind of he was actually kind of a philosophical experiment in his upbringing because both James Mill and Jeremy Bentham was thinking how would it be that a kid was raised understanding morality under the terms of the greatest happiness principle and under the terms of utilitarianism. And he ended up being growing up to be a very significant philosophical representation of this notion of consequentialist morality. So that is utilitarianism. Jeremy Bentham, James Mill, and his son John Stuart Mill were the main authors representing this trend. This theory holds that the best moral action is the one that maximizes utility, the one that is promoting the best possible outcomes for the greatest amount of people and the least amount of pain for the least amount of people. That is the definition in itself of what it means to have to be morally correct. And there are so many actions. I mean, there's no action in our lives that would escape this situation. I could have, I don't know, for any example, I could have just assigned another reading for you to complete this session, but I am recording a video. So I think that I am trying to maximize the amount of pleasure that you are getting by having more usual interaction and stuff like that. Or I can go out and help my neighbor that is taking out the trash, and like there's no action that escapes this element of the amount of pleasure or the amount of pain that an action is producing. And that can go to extremes. Now, maybe you can pause this video for a second and Google Jeremy Bentham's corpse. If you like dark and that kind of that kind of topic, I think that you are going to enjoy that a little bit. So just pause it for a second and Google Jeremy Bentham's corpse. Um, so that what you saw is this project or these determination that Jeremy Bentham made with his own body called his auto icon. And uh, it is clear that having his body in the way that it was presented is having a more significant impact than just being buried on a specific cemetery in any place in England. So it is known that he wrote in his will that if it should so happen that my personal friends and other disciples should be disposed to meet together on some day or days of the year for the purpose of commemorating the founder of the greatest happiness system of morals and legislation, my executor will from time to time cause to be conveyed to the room in which they meet the said box or case with the contents therein to be stationed in such part of the room as to the assembled company shall seem meet. This was written in Queen Square Place in Westminster on May of 1832, and he died like 7 days after at the age of 84 years. So even the disposition of his own body, even the way that his body was going to be remembered, even his remains would present a specific consequence. There is a possibility of a maximization of outcomes even in the determination of how to dispose of a body. So this notion of utility, I know that it is connected with a notion of happiness and pleasure, but it is a bit more complex than what we could say, like just the easy understanding of happiness, like, yeah, whatever is making me smile or laugh. That's not quite the idea of what they are defending as happiness, of this idea of happiness as utility. Utility has to be considered as a principle synonymous of course, happiness and pleasure, but also interest, benefit, function, good, morality, all those things that are positive in life, all those things that we strive for, all those things that we are pursuing in our lives that are we are naturally driven to pursue. Those are the ideas that we should associate with utility and not just things that might be, I don't know, funny or that can give us a good time. The morality of people, action, and institution has to be seen as a calculation of their utility. Consequentially, theories are, in a way, maybe you're familiar with this sentence that the end justifies the means. That is absolutely the idea of utilitarianism. Whatever I am trying to produce, whatever I'm trying to guarantee as the best possible outcome, is going to justify the ways in which I achieve those ends. So this theory is a good representation of the Enlightenment period. This principle of utility is a rational principle for us to judge morality. It is kind of the mark of this era of the 17th and 18th century in which we are not promoting rationality, we are not promoting theories, we are not promoting any uh, significant idea on a human experience based on authority. It is significantly marked by the pursuit of rational principles that are going to give us answers for the big questions about reality. This is a materialistic theory. This criterion of pleasure and pain is not going to be that intellectual. It is rather going to be very physical. It is going to be very associated with the body. And that is how they are going to explain how we are naturally driven to pursue some things and to avoid others. And this is something that I have said in other theories about the importance of the aggregative principle. This is a calculation of all the pleasures and all the pains that are associated with a decision. So justice lies in the maximization of pleasure and the minimization of pain in the aggregate. I cannot say that I am going to do something in order to get one good outcome ignoring all the backlash, all the possible negative or opposed consequences that I'm going to get and say, yeah, but I got my outcome. I got the thing that I was looking for. Rather, we need to consider the aggregate. We need to consider a bigger picture of what are the outcomes of our actions. Are the benefits higher or lower than the harms? Not just that's something that has good consequences, but the big balance and the big calculation of this. This idea of utility implies a principle of impartiality, which breaks the duality that we were seeing in ethical egoism between selfish and altruistic. So it is not, now we are not the most important thing in the world. Now we are just another number. So if I want, if in the trolley car problem, there's like five people against one. But if this one person is, I don't know, the person that you love the most in the world, or is yourself, or any other person that you hold very dear, the calculation here is going to be strictly on notions of impartiality. If this is the person that you love the most in the world, it is still one person. If that person is going against other five people, it is going to be very sad. It is with a heavy heart that we have to take that action, but it guarantees that notion, that principle of impartiality, because we are just the happiness, your happiness and my happiness and the happiness of any other sentient entity is not going to have that significant difference. But we are going to see some nuances on that notion of amount of pleasure. So based on principles of pleasure and pain, it usually takes into account the well-being of all sentient entities. When we talk about pleasure and pain, and I don't know how many of you have pets or have had like very close relationships with animals, but do you think that human beings are the only ones that are likely to feel pleasure and pain? Maybe. I assume that you're going to say no. I assume that some of your experience is going to say, well, actually, I know that animals are also going to have this sensation of this sentient experience of pleasure and pain. Therefore, utilitarians are going to include sentient animals as entities that are part of those calculations. So that maximization of utility are going to also consider the experience of all sentient entities, animals in this case. This theory is highly universalistic, progressive, egalitarian, and definitely new way of thinking about morality. But these three guys were not just thinking about individual morality. We're not just trying to present us with a compass for us to say if we should let our friends use their cabin in the woods or not. They were very concerned also with legislation, with what are the principles. If these are the principles that we are using to defend what is a good or a bad action, so what are the principles that are going to defend what is a good law, or what are the good rights, or how a constitution or any body of laws are going to be developed in a country. So they say if this is the criterion for us to judge what is good in individual actions, it is also something that has to be usable for us to determine what are the right laws to govern society. All of this in defense of the idea of the greater good. Again, the idea of the means justify the ends, because happiness and good consequences are the property that we are trying to use to define what is a good action. So let's talk a little bit more about this idea of what is a good outcome. How can we recognize that an action is a good action? So this idea that like all these things that are associated with utility, how do we recognize, or why do we recognize those as the ideas that are good? So please consider this statement, because it's going to be central for utilitarian considerations of morality. So are all good things, the statement is this: all good things are pleasurable, and all pleasurable things are good. Of course, morally good. So can we establish this identity between the things that we consider good and the things that we consider pleasurable. So whatever gives us pleasure is good, and whatever is good is going to give us pleasure. What do you think about that? So uh, utilitarianism from its start is a theory that is going to be understood as a hedonistic theory. Hedonism is this notion of or a theory that is strictly associated and dependent on pleasure. And the beginning of this was all the way back to the introduction of the principles of morals and legislation developed by Jeremy Bentham, when he said that nature has placed mankind under the governance of two sovereign masters, pain and pleasure. It is for them alone to point out that we ought to do, as well as to determine what we shall do. What Bentham was saying here is that it is just very natural for us to understand that that nature itself gave us the key to understand what are the things that are correct and the things that are not. And the things that are correct are those that are going to give us a more sustainable, more clear, more direct sensation of pleasure. And those things that are giving us pain are just naturally and rationally things that we should consider as negative or bad. So utilitarian as hedonism, a conception of the good life that says that the ultimate good is pleasure. Therefore, the criterion to judge good from bad is pleasure. While traditional hedonism is concerned only with the personal pleasure, utilitarianism is expanding this idea of being concerned with pleasure in general for the highest amount of possible people. That is, with one's pleasure and the pleasure of other people, understand utility as the happiness, pleasure, interest, benefit, function, good, and morality. But imagine for us, we could just like present these nuances of the notion of hedonism, but imagine how this theory would be taken in the 18th or 19th, in the 17th or 18th century, in which we come from this very religious idea, from this very religious tradition, and then all of a sudden there's this group of philosophers that says, you know what, the right thing to do is not what God is telling us anymore. Now it is what is giving you pleasure. So what do you think would be the reaction of to a theory based on the promotion of pleasure? So I don't know, imagine that you're taking your significant other to meet your parents and you say, hey, this is my boyfriend, girlfriend. Uh, he or she is a great person. They are all about the pleasure. Like they are not going to hold back in case that they can get anything that is pleasurable. Even for 21st century parents, that might be a bit difficult to hear. Imagine how it was back in these times. So there was uh, there was this discussion of utilitarianism as an ungodly theory. How is it possible that is going to defend something like this? And John Stuart Mill is going to try to address this issue, and he is going to state that this notion of pleasure is not just a matter of amount of pleasure, but also amount of quality, not just quantity, but also quality of pleasure. It is not an ungodly theory. It is not making us go to indulge in our most basic instincts. That's not what the theory is about. It is going to present a more sophisticated understanding of qualities of pleasure, and from those qualities of pleasure, we are going to try to determine right and wrong. So he says it is quite compatible with the principle of utility to recognize the fact that some kinds of pleasure are more desirable and more valuable than others. It would be absurd that while in estimating all other things, quality is considered as well as quantity. The estimation of pleasure should be supposed to depend on quantity alone. So in this case, Mill is going to recognize some of the historical notions on hedonism, and we could understand that there are some pleasures that are edifying, some pleasures that are improving us, and there are some pleasures that are extinguishing us. If I indulge myself in the pleasure of eating pizza, all the pizza that I want, eventually that is not going to be good for me. That pleasure is going to be extinguishing. It's going to kill me to just eat pizza and indulge in that pleasure. But maybe let's say that I indulge in the pleasure of the arts, or the pleasure of philosophy. Maybe not so much. It was one of the examples that these authors would give. I think that it is kind of a hard thing to sell to you guys right now, but maybe something like the arts, maybe, I don't know, good movies or good music, that kind of pleasure in which you can learn more and grow more. That those are pleasures that are not, you're not going to die because of good music. You're not going to die because of good movies, or like trying to engage in these kind of pleasures. So he is defending that there are some things that are giving us a little bit more of like a human experience, something a bit more of a higher stature than other things that are more like basic instincts, and something more of a lower kind. He said, it is better to be a human being satisfied than a pig satisfied. Better to be a Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied. And if the fool or the pig are a different opinion, it is because they only know their side of the question. They are not, they don't know any better about the nature of what good pleasures should be all about. At this point, we are going to separate the two kinds of utilitarianism. In this session, we are going to see some characteristics of classic act utilitarianism. And on our next session, we are going to see the version that was developed by John Stuart Mill, which is rule utilitarianism. In this case, we see classic act utilitarianism, what produces the greatest amount of unit of utility for the greatest amount of people for every particular case. It is a one particular case. It is a one-time only consideration. When we are analyzing the outcomes of an action, we analyze only that action, not the kind of action, not possible actions of the same nature in the future. We are just on a one-time only, case-by-case analysis of the amount of pleasure that is being achieved by such action. It relies, of course, in the notion of the greatest happiness for the greatest number, and that is how we're going to value each one of these actions. And it considers the morality of an action from its immediate consequences mainly. Jeremy Bentham, who was the author that developed this classic notion of utilitarianism, developed this rubric. I think that I mentioned once when we started talking about moral theories that there was this author that tried to mathematize the benefits of morality. If morality should be something that we could develop in numbers and could have like a mathematical equation for this. So this is the guy. Jeremy Bentham understood that this principle of utility should be produced to try to understand and maximize that happiness. He implemented something that he called the principle, the felicific calculation. So we are going to try to give numbers to the outcomes of a specific action, and try to understand them in terms of right and wrong, or pleasant or unpleasant. So let's see the criteria of this rubric, and let's see them with an example. So let me start for this example presenting this case. So would it be ethically correct for Simone Biles? I hope that you know Simone Biles. If you don't know Simone Biles, please stop, please pause this video and go on a very deep Google search to know who is Simone Biles. So do you think that she should, would it be ethically correct for her to try heroin for the first time? Without this consideration, I'm going to give you some space to answer the question, and then we go to the felicific calculation. Maybe in your answer, you were more focused on like on cultural principles or traditional principles, maybe all of those like school campaigns that are saying, yeah, say no to drugs and all that stuff. So that might be the main motivator for our analysis of this case. In this situation, Bentham's felicific calculation would try to give an answer to each one of these criteria. And it is likely that we are going to give a high or low number to try to determine if it is better for her to do something or not to do something. So these are the criteria. He says he starts with intensity. How strong is the pleasure? Um, do you think that the pleasure for her to try heroin for the first time would be high? Would it be very intense? Um, so allegedly, it is going to be a highly intense pleasure. So in this case, in that first criterion, we are going to get a high number. Now, let's see the second criterion, duration. How long will the pleasure last? Maybe it is not going to be that long. Maybe the rate is not going to be as high as the one of the intensity. In this case, duration is going to last for, I don't know, a specific amount of time. But if we compare it with the pleasure of like getting your degree, or the pleasure of having a romantic relationship with somebody, or all of these things are in comparison, it is not going to be that long. So in terms of duration, maybe the score is going to be lower. Let's talk about the third criterion, certainty. How likely or unlikely is that this pleasure occur? Um, Maybe it is not certain. Um, there is a possibility of a bad reaction to this drug. So, and that it is my understanding that possibility is real. So, in terms of certainty, maybe we are not going to get a high number in this analysis. The fourth criterion is propinquity. In terms of propinquity, is we are asking ourselves how soon will this pleasure occur? Is this something that she's going to have to wait 3 to 5 working days next to the mail to waiting for her pain to get home? Of course not. In this case, maybe we are going to get a high number, because this is going to be as soon as the dose is administered, this pleasure is going to happen right away. Now, the next criteria are opposed are the criteria of fecundity and purity. Jeremy Bentham understands here that every action might have the possibility of a ripple effect, or some ulterior actions that are derived of this action in particular. So the first one, fecundity, the probability that the action will be followed by sensations of the same kind. How likely is that this pleasure is going to give you further pleasure in the future without further actions? I don't know, like we might think of, if some of you are, I don't know, parents, or maybe you remember your first kiss, or you remember the day that you graduated from high school. Those are situations, those are specific actions that gave you pleasure, but just thinking about them are going to give you happiness as well. So getting graduated from high school gave you the possibility to getting more things in the future. So that sensation of pleasure gave you more possibilities of sensations of pleasure in the future. It allowed this ripple effect, this positive ripple effect, for more pleasure in the future. The opposed one is the notion of purity, the probability that it will not be followed by sensations of the opposite kind. So, in the first case, I think that it is not that likely that Simone Biles is going to have pleasure after she has a dose of heroin. It is not going to promote further things of pleasure. But actually, it is going to have the possibility to promote sensations of the opposite kind. It is very likely that she's going to experience sensations of pain after she has experienced the sensation of pleasure. So in this case, fecundity is not going to give us very good numbers, and purity is definitely not going to give us good numbers. It is going to promote more pain than pleasure in the long run. And finally, since this is not ethical egoism, this is not just a matter of individual analysis, we also consider the element of extent. How many people will be affected by pleasure by this action of pleasure? So, is a lot of people going to feel pleasure because Simone Biles tried heroin for the first time? Uh, I think that this is kind of a discussion that I would have with you in the classroom right now, but I don't know, maybe there's a lot of, I don't know, the haters or competitors from other places in the world saying, all right, so she's not going to go to the Olympics anymore. And if she does, well, she's not going to be in such a good shape. So it's good that she's doing that. But of course, at least the entire country is going to receive this situation with a lot of sensations of pain and not with sensations of pleasure. So the balance of pleasure versus pain is going to be significantly affected. At the beginning of this exercise, you might have been analyzing these just from the principle, just from a notion of tradition and authority that say no to drugs and that kind of stuff. Here we have rational, clear, and very specific criteria that we could say, yeah, it's not just because I was told that it was bad. I made my own analysis. I made my own analysis in terms of the possible outcomes that this action was going to produce, and it is clear that it is not going to be a good action. Not because what you're telling me, is because what my rational principles are telling me about this action, and it is not going to be a good one. Now it is your turn. Just let's try to, and you don't have to give me a very in-depth analysis of this. Just like try to mention 3 or 4 of the criteria from the Felicevic calculation to try to determine the morality of these two actions. So imagine that a company is considering 2 options for celebrating its 10-year anniversary. You're tasked with evaluating which option will produce the most happiness for everyone involved using Bentham's Felicevic calculation. So we have some money. We want to celebrate 10-year anniversary of the company. So option number 1 is hosting an extravagant party for the 50 employees, complete with gourmet food, live entertainment, and gift bags for every attendee. So that's like the option on top. And we are having such a great time. It is going to be amazing. How people are going to be involved, how people are going to feel pleasure or pain, that is for you to analyze under at least 4 of these criteria from the Felicevic calculation. The option 2 is organizing a charity event to raise money for a local school with company match donations and an employee volunteer day. In this case, that money is going to be allocated for this event for education. So in both of these cases, what do you think is the Felicevic calculation going to say that is the best possible action between these two? One more analysis that I also want you to do, and I am going to use this for us to understand the difference between act and rule utilitarianism. In this case, the action that I want you to analyze is, according to act utilitarianism, would it be morally correct for Batman to kill the Joker? You know the history, you know the story, you know the comics. Batman doesn't want to kill the Joker, and the Joker always escapes Arkham, goes out, terrorizes people in Gotham, kills a lot of people, then fights Batman, he captures him, he goes back to Arkham, and then we go back to square one. And it keeps happening and happening and happening. So according to act utilitarianism, the individual action, in this case of Batman, killing this specific person who is the Joker, would it be morally correct for him to do it? Yes, no, under act utilitarianism terms. What do you think? And that analysis we are going to expand on our next session, in which we are going um, to provide this contrast with the description of what rule utilitarianism is going to defend and the possible tensions that are going to happen there. I want you to, I also want to give you, and there's going to be a reading in the space for our next module. It's a short story. I know that philosophy is kind of about reading like essays and stuff, but we could also read like short stories and literature and tales and that kind of stuff. So I want you to read this short story. It's very appealing. It's very interesting. It's called The Ones Who Walked Away from Omelas. I want you to read it, and I want you to read it with utilitarian eyes. And we can, and I don't know, the implications that these things for our current and our modern societies is just undeniable. So please read that story, and at the beginning of our session on Tuesday, we will have a chance to analyze and see what are the moral principles that are associated with the people who walked away from Omelas. Thank you for your attention and thank you for your answers. Please let me know if there's anything that is unclear or anything that we should cover so we can take this session on Tuesday to go back, clarify anything that we require, and then keep on moving on with our moral theories. Thank you for that. Keep me posted.